Mark chapter 2, verse 23 through 28. It says, "And it came to pass that he went through the cornfields on the Sabbath day, and his disciples began, as they went, to pluck the ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? And he said unto them, Have ye never read what David did when he had need, and was an hungered, he and they that were with him? Now he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, which is not lawful to eat, but for the priests, and gave also to them which were with him. And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath." Thank you. You may be seated. So here we have a story where Jesus and his disciples on the Sabbath day are walking through a field of corn. And some of his disciples were definitely Filipinos, because they saw that corn there and they said, "Hey, we're not going to walk through this cornfield hungry. Here's the food. Let's grab some and let's have something to eat." Definitely they were Baptists. So they're walking through and they grab some of the ears of corn and they start threshing it, preparing it to eat so they can have a light snack or a light meal. And as they're going through the cornfields, the Pharisees came to them and said, "Hey, what you guys are doing is not lawful. What you're doing is against the law." Now, you would think that the Pharisees were the good guys, and that Jesus' disciples are the bad guys, because we should not be doing things that are not lawful. I hate to be a killjoy here, but if one of you are doing something that is against the law, typically, normally, I'm going to take the side of the law. If I am caught stealing, I would hope that you would say, "Hey, you're a nice guy, Evangelist, that's neat, but you're not supposed to steal." And I hope that you would tell me, "Don't break the law." I hope you would pick the side of the law and not my side, because I'm your friend. And so Jesus has a predicament. He has an issue here. He needs to take the side of the law, or he needs to take the side of his hungry friends. Which side is he going to choose? Well, he chooses his friends, and he says, "Let's talk about the law." And he begins to question here the very law itself. What is the law? What is the foundation of the law? Why is it that this is against the law? And he says, "I'm not going to question my friends. Instead, I'm going to question the law." That would be like me getting caught stealing a car. And then the police catch me, and they put me in handcuffs. And then I go before the judge, and I say, "Hey, judge, how about we talk about the law about stealing cars?" Normally you would say, "Okay, what I've done was wrong. The law has condemned me." But Jesus said, "Let's talk about the law itself. Maybe it's the law that is wrong, and not my disciples." So let's find out which one is wrong. So here they are. They're going through the field. They're eating this corn. And the Pharisees said, "You have broken the law." Now, what did they mean by the law? Well, there's different laws. There's the law of God. That's something that we should never violate. We should never break the law of God. When we break the law of God, it is called a sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. We are to never, ever sin. Do we? Yes, all the time. Should we? No, we should never, ever sin. Now, Philippines, I've noticed they like to pass a law about every 10 seconds. They have a law for everything. Almost all of them are bad laws. So let's just say, for example, that they passed a law that you cannot spank your child. In fact, I read this morning that, I believe it was France, just passed a law just now, just as I was on my way to church. I read about France passing a law that made it illegal to spank a child. Okay? But the Bible says, a father that spareth the rod, who does not spank his child, hates his son. So the Bible commands us to be good fathers. And France, let's say, or the government of the Philippines, for example, passes a law that says you cannot spank your child. What should you do? You know the answer. You spank your child because that's what the Bible teaches. We need to follow what the Bible says. So there are times where we should question the law. Well, is the law wrong? So here we have the law referred to in the Bible as the Bible itself. Sin is a transgression of the law. What law? It's the Bible. It's the one you're holding. That's the law. But the Pharisees, they added to the law the oral, verbal law. That was a law in addition to the law that you can find in the Old Testament. So what law did Jesus' disciples break? Well, you can look at different passages in the Old Testament. The closest that you can come to violating the Sabbath is in Exodus chapter 20. Now just go ahead and turn there real quick. You don't have to. But just think about what they were doing. Okay? As I read the Sabbath commandment in the Old Testament. It says, remember the Sabbath day, Exodus chapter 20 verse 8. 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. Okay? But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work. Now thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Made it holy. So, do you think that the disciples have broken any of those words? The word said very specifically, thou shalt not do any work on the Sabbath day. So the question is, taking some of the corn and eating it as they were walking by, is that work? Obviously, anything that moves is work. So breathing is work. Does that mean you can't breathe on the Sabbath? No, you are allowed to breathe on the Sabbath. Okay? If you don't believe me, then you're already dead. Okay? Yes, you can do some type of work on the Sabbath, like breathing. The Levites and the priests, they worked on the Sabbath. That was their work day. So there was some work that was allowed to be done on the Sabbath. And it says that you could glean from your neighbor's field. You could do that on the Sabbath, I believe it says. So there are some things that is, so the question is, when is work considered work? That's the question. And so the rabbis and the Pharisees and some of the priests, they got together and they made an extra law on top of the law in the Bible. That's the verbal law, the oral law, and that's the law that they said Jesus was violating, or Jesus' disciples were in violation of. They said, you have broken the law. Which law? The oral, verbal law, the law that was added to the Old Testament. Did that bother Jesus very much? No. Jesus said you can take your oral law, your verbal law, the laws that you have added to the Bible, and you can go pound sand. You can go take them and knock yourself out. I'm not going to be bound by the laws that you add to the Old Testament. Okay? So, I want you to understand what's happening. So he's going through, and the Pharisee says, they've broken the law. And then Jesus says, have ye never read? What is he talking about reading? What do you think? The oral law, called the Mishnah, they didn't actually write it down, by the way. Or do you think he's talking about the Old Testament? He says, guys, you're supposed to be reading this. Did you not read this? What law is Jesus saying he wants them to follow. Good, the Old Testament law, the one that's written down. Jesus says, Pharisees, forget about your verbal law, go back to the written law that your verbal law is built upon. Okay? So Jesus says, have ye never read what David did when he had need and was an hungered, he and they that were with him? How he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, which is not lawful to eat, but for the priests, and gave also to them which were with him. So let's turn now to 1 Samuel chapter 21. This is what Jesus is referring to. 1 Samuel chapter 21. We don't have time to read the whole chapter, but basically, Saul is being pursued. David is being pursued by King Saul. King Saul wants to kill David. He's worried that David is a rival to the throne of Jonathan and his own throne. And Saul said it would be more convenient if David was dead. So Saul went out to kill David. So David went and hid himself. And he went through a couple of things, and he got 400 men gathered together, and they had to escape from Saul's army, and they had to flee, they had to run for 3 whole days. No chance to stop and get supplies, no chance to stop and eat. They just had to go, go, go for 3 straight days. And then they came to a town of Nob, which was where the priests lived. And let's just read from verse number 1. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto him, Ahimelech the priest, the king, hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Is that the truth, or is that a lie? What David, yeah, that was a lie. The priest says, Hey David, why are you alone? That's strange. You're one of the most powerful people in all of Israel. You're one of Saul's cabinet position advisors, and here you are alone. What's going on? He did not know, the priest did not know that David was now the enemy of King Saul. And so David wanted to hide and protect that information, and so David told a lie. That lie would later get Ahimelech and all of those priests, except for Ahimelech's son Abiathar, it would get all of them killed. All of them. Not good to tell a lie. So David told a lie and said, Oh, I'm just on a secret mission. And that's why I'm alone. I'm going, out in secret. And the priest says, okay, I believe you. It says, verse 3, David says, Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth women have been kept from us about these 3 days, since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So David has a problem. David's problem is, he needs something to eat for him and his men. They spent 3 days and had nothing to eat, and Saul is chasing them. What's going to happen to them if they don't get something to eat fast? They're going to die. Saul is going to catch them and kill them. So they're going to die, so they go to the priest, and they say, Can I have bread? And the priest says, Well, what's wrong? Why are you alone? So David sins and tells a lie and says, I'm on a secret mission. So David is hungry. Now that part's not a lie. And so David says, Can I have any bread? And the priest says, I only have hallowed bread. That means holy bread. Special bread. Not common bread. Just like what pandesal that anyone would eat on any normal day. So what is hallowed bread? Let's turn back to Leviticus chapter 24. Leviticus chapter 24 verses 5 through 9. And thou shalt take fine flour and bake 12 cakes thereof. A cake is bread, by the way. 2/10 deals shall be in one cake. And thou shalt set them in 2 rows, 6 on a row, upon the pure table before the Lord. So you got 12 pieces of bread. And thou shalt put pure frankincense upon each row, that it may be on the bread for a memorial, even an offering made by fire unto the Lord. Every Sabbath he shall set it in order before the Lord continually, being taken from the children of Israel by an everlasting covenant. So the bread, after it is 1 week old, it is replaced. Verse 9. And it shall be Aaron's and his sons, and they shall eat it in the holy place, for it is most holy unto him of the offerings of the Lord, made by fire, by a perpetual statute. And the son of an Israelitish woman whose father was an Egyptian. I'm sorry, so we're going to stop there at the end of verse 9. So this is the law regarding the showbread. Okay, the showbread was left out for 1 week with frankincense upon it as a special holy bread. It was not to be eaten in any other place except for the holy place. It was not to be eaten by any other person except for Aaron and his sons and their family. And there's rules about who is considered family and who is not. For example, hired help, an Alila, lavandera or something, cannot eat of the bread. But someone that's like a son to them or like a daughter to them, they could. So there's certain rules. Who could eat the bread? Who is their family that could eat the bread? Who is not considered being part of their family that could eat the bread? Where to eat the bread? Why to eat the bread? How to eat the bread? They have all these rules about this bread. The showbread. And David shows up. He says, I need my life preserved. I need the life of my men preserved. And I need the showbread to be able to continue my life. And the priest said, okay, I'll do it. But what about the rules? What about the rules? Here's, I think, a problem with us as Christians today. We know about the rules. And we know that we should follow the rules. And that's true, we should. And we try to live a holy life, and when we don't, we fall into the ditch, and we sin. And so we say, well, I need to live holy away from sin, and we end up falling into another ditch. And that ditch is this. You know what I mean by ditch, right? You have the side of the road, and off this side of the road is dirt and the water, and off this side of the road is the water and the dirt that flows. We say, I don't want to be in sin, because that's wrong, it's not holy. And so rather than being humble and understanding that we are sinful people and we are prone, that means it's so easy for us to go back into the ditch, we become proud, and by that pride we fall into the ditch on this other side. So here's what I mean. Here's the insight I think that Jesus is getting at here. He's saying, look, you Pharisees, you're so excited about laws that you have made. And these laws that you have made are not legitimate. Number one, the Old Testament laws that God has made, those are legitimate, but let's remember who it is that made those laws. Jesus says, I'm Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus here is saying, I'm greater than the Sabbath. I'm above the Sabbath. I'm the one that made the Sabbath. If you want to know about the laws of the Sabbath, you just need to know about me. Because if you know me, you will know why I made the Sabbath. The Sabbath was not made, man was not made for the Sabbath, Jesus said, but the Sabbath was made for man. What does that mean? It means that when we follow rules and we follow laws, we don't follow those rules and laws because they are there. I don't live to follow rules. I don't live and get up in the morning to say, what law do you want me to follow, God? I say, God, how do I make you happy today? Now, I can't make God happy by breaking the rules and by sinning. But I don't keep the rule for the sake of the rule. I keep the rule because of the person that made the rule. And sometimes our focus is on this is the rule, this is the law, and we completely forget and leave out God, the rule giver and the law giver. And so Jesus is saying, hey, to those Pharisees, my disciples eat because the one that gave the law loves those disciples. And he doesn't want the law, the rules, to stop them from serving me. Law should not get in the way of serving God. We should be serving God because we love Him. And we should be obeying His rules and His laws, not because we love the laws, but because we love the lawgiver, we love God.
Hey.
Let me give you maybe a little better example. Leviticus chapter 10. Leviticus chapter 10. Verses 12 through 20. Now, what happened was Nadab and Abihu. They were two of the sons of Aaron. And they messed up and they broke one of God's laws. They offered strange fire unto God. When they did the sacrifice, they offered strange fire unto God. And the punishment for that was death on the spot. Immediately God took fire out of heaven and He burned them up. Why? Because they did not follow the law. So now you're saying, wait a minute, should we follow the law or not? Yes, we follow the law for God, not for the sake of following the law. So Aaron, Nadab and Abihu's father, of course he was grieved. It's pretty upsetting, right? To see your two sons that you've raised and you're so proud of them and they have their own wives, they have their own children, and you watch them get consumed and burned in the fire right before your very eyes. And then you have to finish the sacrifice. The sacrifice is not done yet. There's still more work to do. So Aaron gives his two remaining living sons, and he says, come on boys, let's finish the sacrifice. And so they do. Verse 12, it says, and Moses spake unto Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar. Eleazar and Ithamar are the two remaining living sons of Aaron. It says, his sons that were left, to take the meat offering that remaineth of the offerings of the Lord made by fire, and eat it without leaven beside the altar, for it is most holy. So now we're talking about the showbread here. So the commandment was that Aaron and his sons were supposed to eat it in that certain place. Okay? Beside the altar. That's what they were supposed to do. Eat the bread beside the altar after the sacrifice was done. Still with me, right? You know the rules. That's the rules. And ye shall eat it in the holy place, because it is thy due, and thy sons' due, of the sacrifices of the Lord made by fire, for so I am commanded. So Moses says, make sure you guys eat it. That's part of the rule too. That you eat it. You don't leave it alone. You actually eat it. Why? Because that's the part that's given for you. Now let's stop right there and think about this. Here's the rule. Aaron and his sons, those priests, when there is food left over, they get to eat it. And that's the rule. They get to eat it. Now why do you think that rule was made? What do you think? Think of God. He loves Aaron. He loves Aaron's sons. He loves all the people there. Why do you think that God made a rule for Aaron and his sons to eat that remaining food? It was for Aaron and his sons so they have something to eat. In other words, God doesn't want them to go hungry. God wants them to be taken care of. God wants them to be provided for. And so God made a special rule that says, hey, Aaron and your sons, you're busy, you're doing sacrifices, you're working every Sabbath. I want to make a special time where you are guaranteed that you get to eat. Why? Because He wants to take care of them, because He likes them, because He loves them. We have special rules too, like you're not allowed to work on your birthday. You ever hear that rule? It's your birthday. You're not supposed to work on your birthday. You're supposed to be able to enjoy it and eat. And I noticed it's not a rule here, but in America, the bride and groom are not allowed to work on their wedding day. They're supposed to, the best man And the maid of honor or matron of honor, they will do all the work on the wedding day. So if there's something to do with cleaning up afterwards, or the cake, after the cake is eaten, the bride and groom, they take off in a car and they drive away. They don't need to worry about cleaning up the mess, doing the dishes, making sure everyone gets home, paying the bills, turning off the lights. They don't need to worry about that. Why? Because it's their special day. The rule is they're not supposed to work on their special day. I found out the hard way that's not the rule in the Philippines, because on my wedding day, my wife and I were the last ones to leave, because we had to clean up and make sure everything was taken care of. And that's okay. So God says, on the Sabbath day, I want to make sure that Aaron and his sons get something to eat. I care for them, I like them, I want to make sure they are taken care of. Do you understand the motivation of God?
Yeah.
Do you understand the rule that God made? They were supposed to eat the showbread. Were they supposed to eat it? Yes or no? Yes. And God made that rule so that they could have something to eat. Now let's continue. Verse 14, and the wave breast and heave shoulder shall you eat in a clean place, thou and thy sons and thy daughters with thee, for they be thy due. And thy sons' due, which are given out of the sacrifices of peace offerings of the children of Israel. The heave shoulder and the wave breast shall they bring with the offerings made by fire of the fat, to wave it for a wave offering before the Lord, and it shall be thine, and thy sons' with thee, by a statute forever, as the Lord hath commanded. Verse 16, and Moses diligently sought the goat of the sin offering, and behold, it was burnt. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, which were left alive, saying, so Moses goes and he checks up and he says, why is there still food here? Why is there a burnt goat? You guys were supposed to have cut it and already eaten your portion. Why do I see that your food is left here and no one ate it? How do you think Moses said, look, Aaron, 2 of your sons just got killed for breaking one of God's laws. And now, God told you guys to eat it, and why do I see food here? Do you want, Aaron, you want to die? You want God to kill the rest of your 2 sons? It says, verse 16, and Moses diligently saw the goat of the sin offering, and behold, it was burnt. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, which were left alive, saying, wherefore have ye not eaten the sin offering in the holy place, seeing it is most holy, and God hath given it you to bear the iniquity of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord. Behold, the blood of it was not brought in with the holy place. Ye should indeed have eaten it in the holy place as I commanded. So Moses goes and gets in Aaron's face and he says, Aaron, you were supposed to eat it. God gave it to you to eat. And Moses was angry. And Moses says, you broke another law, just like Nadab and Abihu broke that law just an hour or 2 ago. You're not supposed to be breaking God's law. Moses is upset, and he thinks that Aaron and his 2 living sons are going to die. And then Aaron comes in and says, Moses, let me teach you about God and the why of his law. It says, and Aaron said unto Moses, behold, this day have they offered their sin offering and their burnt offerings before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. So Aaron says, Moses, relax. The offering, the atonement, is done. It's been complete. The work of the atonement and the sacrifice has been completed. Because Moses was saying, hey, the blood, the sacrifice, the atonement is not finished. Aaron says, yes, it is. It's finished. The sacrifice is done. And then Aaron says, Moses, what happened to me today? What happened to Moses? 2 of his sons were killed. What happened to the 2 remaining sons? Their brothers were killed. Was this a good day for them or a bad day? It was a bad day. How were they feeling?
Sad.
Well, sad. Good. And if that were you, would you feel like eating? No. Maybe you, RJ, you don't care your brother gets burned up in fire. Yeah, go ahead, burn my mother too. Why not? And give me something to eat.
You're saved by it.
All right? So Aaron says, I don't have an appetite. I don't feel like eating. And Moses says, but the rule says you have to eat. And Moses says to Aaron says to Moses, but think about the why God made that rule. It was for me to make me happy. It was for me to help me, to make sure I have something to eat. It says, and if I had eaten the sin offering today, should it have been accepted in the sight of the Lord? Look what Moses responded. Moses heard that. So what happened? Moses was angry. Aaron, you are supposed to eat. Aaron says, no, I don't want to eat. God gave that to me to help me. The rule is to help me, and it won't help me to make me eat when I don't feel like eating after watching my family die. That won't make me happy to eat. The rule was to help me. I don't serve the rule, I serve God. God gave that rule for my benefit, and if my benefit is not to eat, I'm not going to eat. This is Moses' wise response. If you ever want a guaranteed wise answer, this is it. Moses' answer. And when Moses heard that, he was content. He held his peace. Okay, Aaron, I get it. Something in Moses' brain clicked. And Moses says, now, Aaron, I get it. The rule was made for you, Aaron. The rule was not made for God. God makes rules not for him. God makes rules for you. God makes rules for us. It's a good thing. God makes rules to protect us. We don't keep the rule out of spite against God. Otherwise, we are keeping the rule in the wrong way. Think about giving. What's the rule on giving? Come on, mathematicians. What is the rule on giving? Yes, and which is 10%. Okay, great. So the rule on giving is 10%. Does God give us that 10% rule for our benefit or for his benefit? For our benefit. Does God need the 10%? Doesn't. If you stop giving your 10%, is God going to go bankrupt? He's not. He owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. He's a rich landowner. He is equally as rich as that one guy in the Philippines. What's his name? What's his name? What is it? Edison? No, not that guy. Not Manalo, the other Manalo. No, way richer than Ayala and Manalo and Henry C. Come on. The guy who says he owns the whole world. Kibaloy, that's it, okay? Kibaloy and God, neither one are going to go bankrupt because they own everything. So if you don't give your 10% to God, he's not going to go bankrupt. So I guess if you're a member of Kibaloy, you can stop giving now. Since he owns everything, why give? Why do they take up collections? I don't understand.
They don't correct.
Yeah, that's right. But he owns everything, so why need to pay? So anyway, when we give, the rule is you give your 10%. That's the rule. If you are giving so that way you are following the rule, you are giving for the wrong reason. God doesn't love a legalistic giver. God doesn't love a giver who gives so he's legal. A giver who gives so he's a law keeper. God says he loves what kind of a giver? A cheerful giver. Is a cheerful giver going to give 10.000000001%? No. He's happy to give. 10% is the rule, but if I'm cheerful about it, I'm going to give more than 10%. Why? Because giving makes me cheerful. Giving makes me happy. If you are giving because you're trying to keep the law, the 10%, you're missing the whole reason for the law. You're like Moses. You're like the Pharisees. They missed the whole reason for the law in the first place. Think about Moses and Aaron. Why did God give the law for Aaron and his family to eat the showbread? It was for them, not for him. That law was for them, for their benefit. Why does God tell us not to commit murder or adultery or to steal? Is it for God's benefit or ours? It's for ours. God's protecting us. A lot of times when we keep the law, when we keep the rule, we do it against God. We do it in spite of God. We say, okay God, fine, I'll keep your stupid law because that's what the law is. And God says, you should be thanking me for the law. We should be thanking God for the 10 Commandments. We should be thanking God that He has given us laws to not make Him rich or make Him happy, but to protect us. So we come to this New Testament, the stories about the Pharisees. They said, why do your disciples eat on the Sabbath day and gather grain to eat on the Sabbath day? Jesus said, Pharisees, you're missing it. And the Jews did. They said, don't worship the law, worship me. I'm greater than the law. We have cults today that we've talked about before. What do they get excited about? They get excited about the law. And what do they miss? The Bible says that the law is our schoolmaster that brings us, that points us, and directs us to Jesus Christ. So people are saying, let's follow the law, let's get excited about the law, let's learn the law. The law is what points us to Christ. The law does not get in our way of Christ. So here the disciples are with Jesus Christ. He's come in the flesh. He's there with them. And they're hungry. And they want to be close to Christ. They want to satisfy that hunger. And Jesus said, you're not breaking the law. Exodus chapter 20. I read that to you. There's nothing in there that says just taking a little bit of food and eating it. That's not doing work. Now going out and hoeing and raking and plowing and tilling and weeding and harvesting, yeah, that would be work. But just taking some food, grabbing it, and having something to eat, that's not violating what we just read. So Jesus is saying, Pharisees, don't get caught up on how good you are at keeping rules. Why don't you get excited about how happy you make God? In other words, we should go beyond just the rule that is written for us. If we're just there about making sure we follow the rule, it's going to lead to pride. Should we follow the rule? Yes. For the sake of the rule? No. But for God. So what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 21? David goes there. And the priest said, the rule is, this is for me and my sons. Remember, like Aaron and his sons? And David says, well, I need it to sustain life. I need it to live. And the priest says, I'm going to give it to you, David. Even though it's against the rule. The rule says I can't. But the priest says, I understand the rule is that it's for me, and this is what I want to do. I want to give it to you. And that's the whole point of the rule, is to help me, and it would help me most by sharing it, David, with you and your family. Why do we go to church? Is it a rule to go to church? Yes, it is. We can turn to Hebrews 10:25, and I can show you there is a rule that says go to church. Amen. Why should I, and why should you go to church? It should not be to follow a rule. Amen. If you are here because you are following a rule, shame on you. If you are here because of Hebrews 10:25, you are here. I'm glad you're here. It's the rule. I'll be there. I'm going to follow the rule. I'm glad you're following the rule. Better to follow the rule for the wrong reason than not to follow the rule at all. I'm glad you're here. But if you're here because of Hebrews 10:25 to follow the rule, you're here for the wrong reason. You should do it because 1 John says if you're a believer, you will desire, you will have a love to be around the brethren. You will want to be in church. Why? Because of your salvation. Not because of Hebrews 10:25. If you gave this morning, if you put your tithes and offerings here this morning, why should you? Why give? If you gave this morning because you said 10.000% and not 0.001%, no more, I'm going to round it down to the 5 centavos. And if I could round it down to 1 centavo, I would do it. Then you know what's wrong with your heart. You're doing it to follow a rule. You should be going to church, not because it's the rule, but because you want to. Because you love what Christ did in your salvation. If you give this morning, it should not be because of a rule. It should be because you're a cheerful giver and you want to make God happy. What were the rules for? It's to protect us. And we see that David broke 2 rules in 1 Samuel chapter 21. One is he ate the showbread. And Jesus said, think about why the rule was given. What was the other rule that David broke? He lied. And what happened to that? I think it was 30 or 70 plus men, priests, were killed. They died. Why? Not because David ate the showbread, but because David lied. So if you say, well, it's not about following the rules, I'm just going to tell a lie. Think about why God made that rule, and then tell me if it's okay to lie. Not okay to lie. And we see that there. And we not going into this, but another point that Christ is making is a man named Doeg saw what happened. He went to King Saul and said, hey, King Saul, that priest, he went and helped David and gave him showbread. And all the priests there allowed it to happen. And so you know what Saul did? He came in, and I told you, he wiped out that whole town. It was a town of priests, and he killed everyone that he could. Only one young one escaped. He went and joined in with David and Abiathar. So Christ is saying, you Pharisees, you are like Doeg. You look at the law and says, he broke the law, destroy him. He broke the law, kill him. Protect the law, defend the law. If one of you, my brothers and sisters, is not here in church and neglects to go to church, I would talk to you and say, why? Don't you know that you're commanded to go to church? And if you say, oh yeah, I'm commanded to go to church, I'll be there. If I have to, I'll be there. Oh, I wish God never made that rule. Then I would say, don't go. That's not the reason. If you're saying, oh, I wish I could be in church, I do, but to preserve life, I'm a doctor or a nurse, and to preserve life, I can't follow that rule. I have to understand why the rule was given. That would speak a lot. That would say, okay, you want to be there, but you can't. Not for money, not for gain, not to get rich, but to preserve life, okay. But you understand why the law was given. If you want to be in church, you want to please God. Not because of the law, not because of the rule, but because of the one that made the rule. The message this morning, if you get nothing else out, is that God cares for you more than His rules. He made His rules for you because He cares for you. But there are times when His rules cannot be applied. Why? Because it's a greater care. It's better for you that the rule be broken than for you to keep the rule. In that case, you know it's because God cares for you. God doesn't hate you. God does not dislike you this morning. God loves you and He cares for you. That's why He made great things for you like rules. And something else that He did for you is that He will remove those rules, whatever is best for you. Now, He will never remove a moral rule like lying or stealing or killing, murdering. But we can see, even in the rules, that God loves us and God cares for us. Let's pray.